What is going on, my fellow geeks, and welcome back to Raving Geeks.
I do have a media recommendation.
I love Lord of the Rings. Superheroes, movies, a little jack of all trades, I guess.
So what makes me a geek?
What is going on, my fellow geeks, and welcome back to Raving Geeks, the weekly pop culture podcast from Central Michigan Life, where we discuss all things geek culture, which is just like high culture, but better. If this is your first time joining us, make sure you follow the CM Life Instagram and Twitter pages for updates on the podcast, and to look for us wherever you find your podcasts, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on our website at www.cm-life.com. Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan Valentine, and I'd like to thank you all for joining me and my fellow geeks this week. And they will introduce themselves in a second with our question of the week. This week's question is, what is the earliest thing that got you into being a geek? First thing. For me, personally, it was the Harry Potter books. Like, in terms of being like a geek and like, you know, I feel like we've defined geek a couple different ways, but like just obsessing over all this like different pop culture stuff is our most general definition of geek. And like, that was the first thing that I was like, you know what, this is really cool. And I want to be Harry Potter and I want to know everything about Harry Potter. So, reading the Harry Potter books was my introduction to geek culture. And then I got a rebirth of introduction when I started playing the Batman Arkham video games, and that brought me into superhero geek culture, and that was a whole different thing. But in general, for me, I'd say it's the reading of the Harry Potter books. Would one of the other hosts like to answer our question?
I'll go. So, hey everyone, I'm Hope Gooderell. For me, what got me into being a geek was also like Brendan. It was the Harry Potter series. As a kid, like I would read books, but I guess my reading comprehension wasn't that great. And when I was younger was when the Harry Potter movies were coming out. And so I was told that I had to read the books and then talk about them with my sisters in order to see the movies. So that got me really into both books and movies, and like finishing out the Harry Potter series after reading them all the books multiple times was, you know, really fun for me to do, especially with my sister. We went to the last Harry Potter premiere, and because like I'd gotten tickets for it beforehand or something, and we were in one of the rows, and during certain deaths we would or like certain times, like one of us would reach our hand over and the other one would just grab it, and like you could tell we were crying and everything. And then after that, it just kind of like followed through with what I liked at the time. So like the next thing was like the Percy Jackson series, and that got me into Greek mythology a lot. I'd had like some interest in it before, but it definitely like deepened with the Percy Jackson series. But my very first one was definitely Harry Potter.
All right. I'm Isaac Hunter. And my first introduction to the geek world was also Harry. No, that's actually a lie. I read Harry Potter before Deathly Hallows movies came out. It was like after the sixth one, but before the 2 7 ones. Just so I could be that guy that was like, yeah, I read it before all of Harry Potter came out. But I ended up being that guy, so that's good. No, what really got me into the world of geekdom, in a broader sense, was my dad. He's a bigger geek in size and in everything, but was definitely with movies, I think. Like, ever since I was a little kid, it was just like, it was probably Star Wars, to be honest. Like, my dad owned Star Wars, before I was born, and so like I just grew up watching those. And then by the time I hit like, I don't know, a certain age, Lord of the Rings came out, and I remember being little, like looking at the cover of Lord of the Rings and seeing like this curly haired dude, and I was like, what is this movie about? And then like watching it and being like, oh my gosh, I need to know everything.
Eagles.
Why didn't? No, I'm just kidding.
Nice. Well, thank you very much, my fellow geeks. It's always fun to get our origin stories. We always read about the origin stories of our favorite characters, but it's fun to talk about ours. So for our geek news this week, it was actually a very active week in the world of geekdom. So our news section is a little bit longer than normal, but I am very excited. So, Isaac, would you like to start with our geek news this week?
I will start us out with our geek news. So I was delighted when a friend of mine messaged me a link to an article saying, new Avatar: The Last Airbender stuff. And I was like, please, we already know that there's going to be like a new TV show and that the creators left. They're like, no, read the article. And I was just so excited to learn that the original creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender franchise got together with Nickelodeon to create Avatar Studios, like specifically this division designed to create, original Avatar content. And I'm so excited. And their first project is going to be an animated theatrical film that's going to start in production later this year. And I'm just I love that world. It's so cool. And like, I know that there's comics and stuff, but like to finally get like this, like studio coming out with the original creators, like I'm sure someone out there loves the live action movie, but I didn't. And now we can finally get something like more expansive. I'm just really excited about that.
So did the article say like who the theatrical, release will be following? Is it going to follow Aang, Korra, Kyoshi, a new character in the universe, or? From the article I read, it didn't mention it directly what it would be following. Because I didn't find it either. Whether they were going to say it.
I looked, and I mean, I don't know. I like being surprised, but I'm excited.
My theory is that this is their way to make the unreleased season 4 of Avatar. But because they've already released it in comics, they don't need to, go super in depth. But I'm throwing it out there now. If, as my prediction, we're getting a follow-up story between, the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. Hopefully, right after Avatar: The Last Airbender, and maybe like the story of how Zuko finds his mom, in addition to like the story of how Republic City gets founded. Because I know those are in comics, but I feel like they could turn that into a pretty cool movie.
And we need more Sokka, because there was no Sokka really in Legend of Korra.
No, there was no Sokka, even though Sokka's definitely Suyen's dad. Spoilers. That's not canon, but I think it's canon.
Canon up here, okay?
It's head canon. We're going to talk about those later. Alrighty. So Hope, I know you have a lot of stuff to go over too.
All right, I'll try and be quick in some of it. So there was a casting announcement for The Flash. Sasha Calle has been cast as Supergirl in the Ezra Miller Flash movie. Jordan Peele, his next horror movie is going to star Keke Palmer, which is set to be released on July 22nd, 2022. So we get to look forward to that. Also, if you guys love bears and you love Paddington the bear, we are getting a Paddington 3 is in the works.
Yes.
Oh, my mom's going to love that.
Paul King, who is making Wonka, will not return to direct Paddington 3, though, unfortunately. If you are a Criminal Minds fan and you are sad that Criminal Minds ended after 15 seasons on CBS, have no fear. Paramount Plus has got your back and is in early development of Criminal Minds season 16. They weren't like forthcoming about which characters were coming back. And at one point I saw something about Hotchner coming back and I was like, wasn't the actor convicted of stuff? But anyways.
On a Criminal Minds note, I have not personally been invested in the show, but everyone in my life has watched it. What is the actor's name that plays the really smart character?
Matthew Gary Gubler?
Yeah.
Yes. Found out that this week that the song Mr. Brightside, he's like the antagonist. of that song. I don't know if that was a joke or if the lead singer of the Killers, like was in a love triangle with Gary Gubler. But if that's true, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
I feel like I saw that somewhere and I got really confused because I've never actually heard that song or pay attention to it. Sorry.
Coming out of my no.
And now I just added something to my recommendations for the end of the episode.
It's probably one of those, like, if someone played it for me, I'd be like, oh, okay, I've heard this. But, like, just saying it out loud, I have no recommendation.
All right, Isaac. 3, 2, 1. Coming out of my cage, and I've been doing just fine.
Gotta
be down because I want it all.
It started out with a kiss.
Okay, I will admit it sounds familiar, but like I said, I'm like, yeah, no. Unless I super pay attention to this stuff in the music industry, I'll be like, oh yeah, I know this song by listening to it. But someone's like, oh, have you heard this song? I'll be like, no.
Well,
and then they'll play it, and I'm like, oh, I know this.
The crazy thing about Mr. Brightside is something about like our generation where if it just plays, you know it. Like you don't even have to hear it before. You just start singing. It's great.
You mean like Counting Stars by, I think, One Republic?
Yeah, I know every word of that song, and yet I've never chosen to listen to it.
So yeah, back to our geek news. If you are fans of horror movies, and specifically like the creepy stuff, The Exorcist is coming out this year, because it is 2021. Keep forgetting that. So it's coming out this year. Don't know when necessarily, but it's coming out. As far as Fantastic Four, we've been hearing rumors about different things, and people have been theorizing. So there's a new rumor that Jennifer Lawrence has been cast as the Invisible Woman.
Oh my god, I love that.
So if anyone is fans of John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, you might not get that whole power couple thing in Fantastic Four. I'm sorry for that, but also Jennifer Lawrence is amazing. So let's see. Oh, there's going to be a new show coming out on Netflix that's going to be called The Irregulars, which follows a group of teens, of ragtag teens, during like the original Sherlock Holmes era. And they work for Sherlock Holmes to help solve crimes. And there are stories, Sherlock stories that involve like the teens, because they're basically like his kids that like could get into places to find out information that if he went to go find it, he would get discovered right away. But The Irregulars is following a supernatural aspect. So there's going to be like ghosts, ghouls, spirits, and like magic and all of that. And that's supposed to be coming out on March 26th. And the actor that I follow who's in the show, I'm sitting here going, okay, you say Netflix UK, but then he was like, also worldwide. And I was like, does that mean the US gets it on the same day? And I'm hoping, because I haven't seen anything. But so March 26th for The Irregulars. Going back to Fantastic Four, Marvel Studios has started meeting with writers for the film, but there's currently no script and there's still some time before filming starts. Let's see. Sorry, just going through my list. So let's see here. So Tom Holland says that WandaVision is his favorite Marvel thing that he has ever seen.
That was my favorite tweet this week.
Like, for the fact that Tom Holland says this, and he's Spider-Man, he's always wanted to be Spider-Man, he loves Iron Man too. He is quoted saying, "We work through the weekends for Spider-Man 3, so every Saturday, everyone's on set talking about WandaVision, and everyone is spitting out theories about what's going on." So the fact that like he's shooting a Marvel movie and then also being like, I have no idea what's going on in my movie, so here, let's theorize about WandaVision. You know, it's true to Tom Holland.
Marvel solidarity.
Yes. Also, on March 26th, coming to Disney Plus, is The Mighty Ducks Game Changers. And we get Emilio Estevez back as Gordon, right? Yes. Yeah.
Coach Gordon.
And Gordon Bombay. But this one is different. Like, the Ducks have become
bad guys. I mean,
Yeah, like they're now the team that they used to compete against. You know, like the Ducks were inclusive, now they're not. They're very exclusive. Oops. So, it was also noted that John Watts, who has been the director of the Spider-Man series with Tom Holland, he is going to be the first director in Marvel Cinematic Universe to finish the trilogy that he started. So he's been doing Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, and the third Spider-Man movie. And then...
Well, we'll see about that.
From our podcast episode from last week, where we talked about Broadway theater, there is a big rumor that Aladdin Live from the West End will be on Disney Plus by this spring. So we will get a chance, like we were able to do with Hamilton. Hopefully we can have Aladdin. And then in the book universe, Rick Riordan, who wrote the Percy Jackson series along with a whole bunch of others that go with different types of mythology, is coming out with a new book, and it's coming out in October, and it's called Daughter of the Deep. So I'm looking forward to that one. And then final for book news is, if you liked A Nightmare Before Christmas, there's going to be a new novel completely about Sally that's supposed to be coming out sometime soon. So
Interesting. Quick question about the Rick Riordan book.
yes.
Is that within like the Greek like, do we know if that's within the Greek mythology universe?
It is
or if
within
that's-
mythology, but it didn't say specifically. And it did say to like, there's more details at Barnes and Noble, and like, because they're the ones who are going through it. But there is a picture. Rick Riordan posted a picture of a cover picture of what it looks like. It says cover not final, but it says coming up for air October 5th of this year.
Nice.
So,
Did he end up?
Awesome.
Is there a Norse mythology series he's done?
there is.
Magnus.
Is the
Chase.
series? Is it done?
Yes. I
Okay.
think so. But then, I mean, no, the Rick Riordan world though is all connected anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was trying. I was trying to remember if that one had finished off and we were moving on to like a new mythology.
I know.
Yeah, he's got Trials of Apollo, which is specifically on Apollo. The Kane Chronicles is Egyptian. He worked with another author to make a Native American series, I believe. He didn't
Ooh,
write
I didn't
it,
know
but
that one.
like he essentially presented the book, basically saying, "Hi, I'm a famous author, and here's my name on it," to try and get it to sell more. And then you've got Greek with the Percy Jackson, and then Roman with the one after with Jason and all of them. I feel like I saw something else recently, but it might have just been like a different cover art for one of his books. But yeah, so there's a lot that he's done, and he does a really good job of like actually like researching mythology too, and like making sure that it's as factually
that's what
correct
made the
as
Percy
possible.
Jackson book so good. Is it like
Yeah.
you'd go back and like at least as soon as I had access to the internet, I was like, "Is this true?" And I'd be
Yeah.
like, "Oh wait, that's legit." So
Yeah.
that was always fun.
Especially when you like grow up watching like Hercules and you're like, wait a minute, none of this is correct.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did do a speech once on Oceanus and why he's my favorite Greek deity and why Percy Jackson did him wrong. But that's pretty much the only thing I could find.
Dionysus for the win.
Yeah, I will say,
I do love.
as far as like the Greek mythology went, he definitely stayed with the big names rather than the smaller gods. Like in one of the Percy Jackson books, I remember him being like, Percy was telling his dad and like Zeus, like, "Hey, you need to like claim your kids, even the smaller gods. Like you need to claim your kids." And so then they were like, "Yeah, they're building cabins for this deity," and I'm just waiting for like the Celtic and Irish gods and goddesses to come out, and like
Which
that
they
Later
might.
on an artist.
I mean, there's a. I'm assuming this Daughter of the Deep will have to do with a god of water.
Somewhere.
And there's
yeah.
one in every single mythology, so we can hope.
There are multiple types of gods of water too.
Maybe a Pacific Islander story too, with like
That'd be cool.
Maury gods.
Yeah, I would love that.
I will talk about a book later that delves into Celtic and other British Isles mythologies. But on the geek news front for myself, we mentioned Tom Holland and Spider-Man, and if any of you were checking stuff out on Instagram, we got a couple of fake titles for the newest Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man Phone Home. What was it?
Homewrecker?
Spider-Man Homewrecker and Spider-Man
Home Slice.
Home Slice.
Yeah, Home
that
Slice.
one was Home
Which
Slice
I
was
thought
very
was
clearly.
hilarious.
Yeah, that one was very clearly fake. But Phone Home, I was like, okay, maybe. And then Homewrecker, I was like, interesting. I could see that. But then later in the week, we did get the official title of Spider-Man 3 as Spider-Man No Way Home, which I think is. I'm very excited that we officially get the title. And the way they did it was very cute. If you haven't seen the video, like it's Tom Holland going into John Watts' office or coming out of John Watts' office. And then Zendaya and
Jacob.
I was like, he looks so different. I forget his name now.
When they put the wig on, it's like,
Yeah.
Jacob, you're not Jacob. He's Ned.
Ned. But then they're walking in. He's like, "Yeah, no, he won't even like give me a hint as to what the real title is." And then Jacob and Zendaya are like, "It's because you spoil it. That's why." He's like, "Name one time I've spoiled stuff." And then they walk past a whiteboard and it's like Spider-Man, No Way Home, and then they do like the whole promotional thing. So, Marvel's marketing team is definitely having like a field day with Tom Holland.
I took a picture of like the quick at the end of the video. So they had like different crossed out things. So like work from home, home worlds, home sweet home, close
Homesick.
to home. Homesick was one. Home run, homemade. Oh yeah, the work from home, they crossed it out and wrote, please no.
Spider-Man Work from Home.
Web
They should make like
camming?
a short
God.
called Spider-Man Work from Home. Just like even like an animated thing where it's just like Spidey during the pandemic.
There was another one that was like zooming home, and homeschooled, and it was something like there was a comment about like Aunt May says something else. But yeah, it was hilarious. And the fact that Tom Holland was like, what have I spoiled? I was like, they're like literally the last title for the last movie, Endgame or Infinity War poster. Like
They didn't let him spoil Endgame. They told him nothing.
they told him nothing. That's true. They were like, here's a ball on the end of a stick. Who is it? We're not telling you. Yeah.
But apart from like title and a little bit of art and like those little things, there isn't really much to go on from the Spider-Man from the title. But however, still very exciting that they're already willing to put out like promotional materials, and the movie's coming out in December. So odds are in the next couple weeks we'll probably get, if not like a full blown trailer, then probably a teaser trailer before summer starts is my prediction, and then probably trailer 2 mid-August, and then final trailer late October, early November. Depending on, it says Christmas 2021, but I'm pretty sure it's coming out a few weeks before.
I always say Christmas just to like give that
hype it up.
Yeah, a day of like, hey, go do this for Christmas.
Mm-hmm. But also, we got an official premiere date for the Loki TV series, which will be June 11th.
My birthday.
Yes. And the other thing that got a release date is the day after my birthday. But that's for The Bad Batch. If any of you are Clone Wars fans, is coming out on May the 4th. Surprise. But my birthday's May 3rd, so I was like, oh, yes, birthday present. I get Bad Batch, Bad Batch TV show. So for those of you who aren't familiar, The Bad Batch is a group of clones from the Star Wars universe that have genetic defects that kind of give them like superpowers or like super senses, and they got introduced in Clone Wars season 7. So it was really cool. This actually, I think, is the first like canon, apart from comics content from Star Wars, that takes place like in that like immediately Imperial era, like right after the Empire takes over, and like it's on Coruscant and like interacting with the Empire. like clearly we have like Rebels, which is in between Revenge of the Sith and like Rogue One, and we have Solo. But like Solo does not like Han does not really interact with the Empire that much. He's interacting with like crime syndicates.
I mean, the Empire gives him his name.
Yeah, it gives him his name. Whatever. No, they're not the villain of that movie.
Yeah.
But then with Rebels, it's like, but the Empire is the enemy. You're not with the Emperor. Like we have not seen Imperial Coruscant ever.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm excited to see that. And then we'll talk about this more next week, but I just want to make sure everyone is aware that the 25th anniversary of the Pokemon franchise is this upcoming week. And we have a Nintendo Direct as of the filming of this tomorrow. It will be passed by the time this releases. And then we have a whole day of Pokemon Celebration on Saturday. So not going to get too deep into that because that's a whole episode. But just want to make sure everyone is aware. And then our last thing that I want to delve in a little bit more to is Superman and Lois premiered on the CW this week with a 2-hour-long premiere. It was actually like I didn't have super high expectations for this personally, just because I was like, well, we already have Supergirl. Like, how are they going to differentiate this show from the other ones? It is a very different vibe. It does not have a vibe like any other CW show I've watched, specifically the superhero shows. Like Arrow was like kind of like dark nighty. Flash is way more campy and like kind of gives me like vibes closer to like the animated shows. Legends of Tomorrow is literally just like a comedic superhero show, and Supergirl is way like lighter. It still has that hope message, but it's like the tone is way lighter. Superman and Lois was surprisingly like, I don't know if it was just the color tone or like how things were, but it was surprisingly dark for a Superman show.
Yeah. I was like watching it throughout the entire thing. I was like, oh, and there's this death, and then there's this death, and then we've got this thing and this bad thing. And I was like, okay. I did like that the end was lighter tone though, to like kind of contrast from it, and it was a really good first episode, I think.
Yeah, I'm definitely invested. I was kind of skeptical because the show will not be taking place in Metropolis; it'll be taking place in Smallville, and I was like, that seems like a lighter tone. You're like, oh, Superman, teaching his boys how to be Superboys. And I'm like, no, it's like Superboy's got like problems. It's like Superboy's anxious all the time.
He is half human, okay? Humans have anxiety and social anxiety. It is normal.
Yes, and I'm like, but it's also like, all the portrayals, or at least people think of like Jonathan Kent and like Clark Kent, even though he has, in post-crisis, he has twins, and it's Jordan and Jonathan Kent. But they think of the Jonathan and Clark, yes.
The kid who plays Jonathan Kent, his real name is Jordan.
Oh, that's really funny.
So yeah, that was just something that it's like, yep, okay.
Mm-hmm. But in the comics, the vibe of like Clark Kent and Jonathan Kent is like Jonathan Kent's like, oh, Pop, can I follow you to work? And all this like silly, it's not like that light, but it's definitely not like, Dad, I can't control my emotions and I just made a field explode. Help. I hate you because you didn't tell me you were Superman. You're the worst father. I'm like, okay, so spoilers. We won't get into that much stuff, but the vibe is not, I love my dad who's Superman. It's like life sucks because my dad's Superman.
I was gonna say, to be fair, they did have the moment of Jordan being like, you didn't tell me you were Superman. I hate you. And so my roommate and I were watching it together, and we were like, and she made the comment before it happened. She's like, if I found out that he was Superman, he hid that from me, I'd be really pissed off. And then 2 seconds later, they're like, yeah, we're mad at you for not telling us this. And I was like, hey, they did it right,
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely.
Yeah, and I liked that they brought back Lana, and that she has 2 kids, and that one of her kids, is friends with Jordan and Jonathan, and I liked that. And it took me a minute because I thought that Lana and Lois were sisters.
That's Lucy. Her sister's name was Lucy, who
That's who it
technically
was. Okay.
exists in the Arrowverse because like she
Yes.
was cast in Supergirl season 1.
Wasn't it Jenna Dewan Tatum? Not Tatum anymore.
Yeah.
Jenna Dewan. Okay.
But the thing is that's the one thing that irks me about this. So we're going to limit spoilers, but like they don't mention Crisis at all. I don't know, or any other CW show. Which, given the extended universe, I would have liked a Supergirl nod, even if it's not like a cameo, but just say like there were several opportunities where like Superman had to go do something at like Clark had to do something as Superman, where he could have just said, "Let Kara handle it."
Yeah.
But like it's leaving me questions because this is not how I thought the Superman of the CW verse was given pre-crisis, but I guess we don't really know what Superman looks like post-crisis. So I just hope we're getting answers to that soon. I'm also super pleased with the villain. I will not spoil information about them that we get at the end of the episode. But I'm excited for the type of villain that Superman will have to be facing because, first of all, this villain seems to be able to go toe-to-toe with Superman, which is an impressive feat in and of itself, but it doesn't seem forced. Like they don't just seem ridiculously overpowered. They're just very calculated. So I'm like, alrighty, I'm down for this. They also seem to be a villain created from the Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I think will get us those answers that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'll say I spent the entire episode going, it's Doomsday. It has to be Doomsday, right? And it wasn't Doomsday.
Nope, it's a suit. So it's like, nope, it's not. But I also got like, I wonder if they're going to do like a world killer type thing because of there's this whole thing with nuclear power. But all right, Isaac, I know, I'm sorry, you haven't watched it yet.
Hey, no, that's fine. I'm just nodding along.
But highly recommend.
Watch it, Isaac.
Exceeds expectations. Very different from a lot of the other CW shows. So I'm glad it's not just kind of like blending in with those vibes. I like that they can keep coming out with like different shows. Like it's a family drama, but it's not like it's darker than I was expecting, which is not a bad thing.
And I also really I think Tyler Hoechlin does a really good job of portraying all the different sides of Clark Kent and Superman. And I thought that when he first joined on too, and I've been following him since he was on Teen Wolf. Yes, I'll admit that I watched that. I still do on occasion. And like, honestly, he's such a good actor. And I will say that was one thing that like tripped me up. Because I was like looking at Tyler Hoechlin's face and then looking at the two kids who play his son, who are actually 3 years apart in real life. And I was like, you don't look like they look too baby-faced, all of them. And it's like, I feel like there needs to be a little bit more age gap. But also I was like, Tyler Hoechlin's got this. He's got this. He's got the dad roll down.
Oh yeah, I actually thought the casting was really good.
Oh, yeah.
I was hesitant when they first cast Lois back in, what was it, like for the Elseworlds crossover was when we first saw her.
I think so, yeah.
For the CW. But I prefer her when she's more than just a cameo. Giving her more lines, giving her more to do and more to be. Definitely as not just as like, it's interesting because you always see Lois Lane as like the reporter and like that's her thing, but also seeing her as a mom is very interesting.
Well, and then also fighting with her dad too, like that whole family thing and trying not to go too far into it. I know like we could talk about this for a bit, but I was surprised that her dad knew that Clark was Superman, but also I was like, that makes sense.
I wasn't surprised. I was like, that seems Sam Lane being like involved.
Yeah.
Like that is like a choice that has been made before in different incarnations. So
yeah. And I was like, okay. And so she has to deal with her family and then also her immediate family of her boys and her husband. And I was like, I can deal with that. I can do that.
And just, I guess my last comment on it will be, I have never been a huge fan of Superman since like post Silver Age, Bronze Age, Modern Age Superman. It's always to me like he's the blue Boy Scout. He's got, his problems aren't real. He's not human. There's nothing for me to like, he's going to win. Like there's no like, even Clark Kent is not that like interesting to me. But Tyler Hoechlin portraying Clark Kent and the writing in this is, I'm like, I am invested in your storyline, and there's a moment where I like got a little emotional. I was like, oh, I feel bad for you. That's hard. So
Yeah, definitely like almost cried in the first 5 minutes. So.
Oh, wait, never mind. Not the last thing. So the first like 10 minutes of the show. I'm sorry, I completely blanked on this. This is my favorite part of the episode. Is he gives like a recap of like, this has been my life as Superman so far. But his first appearance as Superman, they gave him like the Action Comics like accurate suit.
I actually didn't see that part.
Oh, that was so good. I was like, oh, no way. And then like the guy's like, oh, cool suit. And he goes, my mom made it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's not what Action Comics Superman would say. He would snap your neck. But because those of you who aren't familiar with, Superman used to be like really rough. Like first issue that Superman ever appeared in, he broke into the governor's mansion because a woman that was wrongly convicted and put on death row, and he found out. So he just like kidnapped her from prison and brought her to the governor's mansion so he could pardon her, and like just totally out of the blue. That's like issue 1 Superman, and like that Superman I love.
That's my Superman.
That's my Superman. But yeah. Alrighty. Well, that's it for our geek news, which I know that was like a really long segment, but there was a lot that happened. So for the rest of the episode, we would like to point out that by the time this episode is released, it will be March. And guess what, everyone? March is reading month. And you might not have heard that since you're in elementary school, but you're hearing it now. So, in order to honor March's reading month, we thought we'd have a quick discussion about some of our favorite books, what got us into reading, and what books we might be reading, in the future. What have we got on our list? So, we'll start off with a pretty basic question. How'd y'all start reading?
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter?
Well, okay, to be fair, like I was reading before that, and there was a series called Animal Arc series, and it followed a girl named Mandy Hope, and her parents were veterinarians, and they had a vet clinic like attached to their house. And this is set in like England somewhere. I don't remember where exactly, but I remember being obsessed with the books because 1, animals, and 2, my name was on their names. And I, at one point, almost had the entire series. And then I was like, oh, I'm going into secondary education. And I was told that any books that were considered elementary level, I had to sell. So I no longer have that collection. But like it got to the point of my dad and I found one book that was a misprint. Like it went to a certain chapter and then all of a sudden it went back to other chapters. And then, yeah, it was a great misprint. Probably could have gotten a lot of money for it, but didn't think about it at that time. But yeah, Animal Arc was huge for me. My mom tried getting me into Magic Treehouse. I didn't get into that one as much, but
I'm gonna bring up Magic Treehouse again later, but that was also one of my first series was Magic Treehouse. Also, I feel like any book that was at like the Scholastic Book Fair, I don't know, was that like a thing at other people's schools?
Oh yes.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
But like anything that they advertised in like that like 5-minute video of like, here's the books coming to the Scholastic Book Fair. It's like always like the new Diary of a Wimpy Kid book or Captain Underpants and like those kind of things that were like kind of a comic book, but not really. Like the most campy graphic novels you can think of. Those are definitely things that I grew up on. But Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Captain Underpants.
I think that's how I got Bridge to Terabithia. It was at a Scholastic Book Fair one year, and like our teachers were like, "Oh, everyone has to get this," or like everyone will be reading this at some point, like as like a whole class. But I remember watching like one of the trailers for it, and I'll be honest, a lot of times at those book fairs, I was like, "Oh, this comes with like a bracelet or something," and I was like, "Okay, I want this book now."
I'll get these pencil toppers.
Yeah. My mom was like, "Are you sure you want this, or do you just want the like thing that it comes with?" And I was like, "Just the thing that it comes with." Okay, you can't get it then. Darn it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I I mean, I was trying to think of like what actual like book as a kid did I start reading and like worked my way up. But I guess what really got me into reading, well, obviously I did read like British Terabithia and Magician's Nephew, and I read Where the Red Fern Grows, all like in elementary school for like classes. And I don't know why they made me read Where the Red Fern Grows, because any book where a dog dies, it's just awful.
Now it has two dogs
Two dogs die.
Like,
yeah.
what the heck?
Anyways, I remember, speaking of Scholastic book fairs, the first book that I ever owned like myself, because I won it, was Peter and the Starcatchers.
Oh my god, that series is so good. I love that series.
It's basically like another telling of Peter Pan, and it's super
like
cool.
Origin story of Peter Pan.
Okay, I've never read it. However, when I did forensics in high school, which is like competitive speaking and acting, I saw a group like perform it, and it was really cool.
No, and it's so cool. And instead of it's like before Peter Pan almost, and so like there's like instead of Captain Hook, it's Captain Stash because he's got this big mustache. So good. But also in elementary school, me and my cousin, we found Percy Jackson. And I have the Sea of Monsters because my school only had the Sea of Monsters and the Titan's Curse. And so I read this book, and then I read the Titan's Curse, and then I read the first one. So technically, this was my first book in the Percy Jackson world, and I kind of always like, whenever I reread the series, I just like hold it in my heart. I'm like, this is what started me.
So you must have been really disappointed when that movie came out.
Yes.
I believe I've stated this before, but like, if you don't know the book series and you watch the movies, they're relatively okay. Like, separate, they're okay.
Lightning Thief is really good. Sea of Monsters is a bad movie.
Yeah.
But if you know them together, then it doesn't stand up. But
nope.
Yeah. I also, Logan Lerman, I love him. And then Douglas Smith, who played Cyclops' half-brother Tyson. Absolutely adorable. And I love him in The Alienist. So, yeah.
Another series that got me hooked, another Scholastic Book Fair one that they had the new one every year, was the 39 Clues. But those came with like trading cards almost, and you'd have like the website, and then like you had to like log it in, and if you bought like if you bought all the books, you'd probably collect all 39 clues, and it was like that was the whole thing as well.
Was that one written by, like, each book was written by a different author? Yeah, okay. I remember that because like in 6th grade, me and two of my friends, we were like, we want to write like a book series together, and like each book is going to be by a different one of us, and we never like fully finished it. I probably have the pages around my house somewhere, but I think that was like what we were basing it off of. Like, we had seen the 39 Clues.
Mm-hmm.
Another series. Oh, go for it, Brendan.
Oh no, I have nothing important to say.
I was gonna say another series. Isaac brought it up. The Magician's Nephew, the Chronicles of Narnia, was such a good book series. And that was another one that like I was like, oh, look at this movie coming out. And I think it was Prince Caspian that was coming out. I was like, I want to go see
Narnia books.
Yeah.
The Narnia books. Oh my gosh,
delayed reaction from Magician's Nephew there.
I completely blanked that was the first one. And I was like, oh yeah. No, those are really good. Magician's Nephew is my favorite. Wait, no.
Well,
Magician's Nephew is not my favorite one, but
that's the thing. So like there's technically 2 different sequences in which you can read the Chronicles of Narnia. You can read it by publishing date, which is how the movies are, which is Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and then
Horse and His Boy.
Chair?
Horse and His Boy is next.
His Boy.
Silver Chair.
Silver Chair, and then The Magician's Nephew. No.
The Last Battle.
The Last Battle. Yeah.
The one that's chronologically first is my favorite. Is that Silver Chair?
Chronologically is The Magician's Nephew. Because that's that's what goes over like how Narnia was created, where the land.
That one's my favorite.
From. It's super cool, and like it really makes you appreciate like the Pevensey children's like what is it, their great uncle or whoever he is, the professor. Because you like found out that he like adventured in this realm a long time. It's so cool.
I think if I remember correctly, and this might be the movie getting mixed up with the book, but the professor was just someone who lived on the countryside because it was taking place during World War II, and England had this big thing of save the children, and basically sent their kids to random houses out in the countryside because you had the Blitz and everything happening.
Yeah.
And so I think the professor was just someone who was like, look, I have this big house, it's empty, and a whole lot of land. And
I mean, that's the dream, right?
yeah.
Like, if you're gonna get put somewhere safe, at least be with a rich old guy that has a magical world in his closet.
And who knows about the magical world too. And it's like, you're not crazy. I know it exists.
What's insane is that C.S. Lewis isn't the kind of guy, like, when it was written, he wasn't the kind of guy to expand it into like millions of books, because he was, he had all these other book series and like theological stuff and future stuff. But like Magician's Nephew discusses like the wardrobe's made out of a tree, which stood over top of a small pond, which led into the world of Narnia.
Yeah.
But that's just one tree in a forest of trees, each one which led to a different world. So he could have
most definitely
kept going. Like the witch herself is from a totally different world. That's like post-apocalyptic almost. And I don't know. I just think it's crazy. It blows my mind.
And that's why I like Magician's Nephew so much, is because of that, like that world between worlds-esque like thing where it was like, you go to the witch's world first and you're like, oh, she seems, after seeing the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie, I was like, she seems familiar. Is she like the White Queen? And then it's like, oh, they try to go back there and it's like, no, sun exploded. It's like, oh, okay.
Well, and then she follows them back to like England or whatever, and that's how they get the lamppost, because she throws the lamppost through the pond, through the other pond into Narnia, and it's like, wait, what?
After hitting a guy with it too. The first king and queen of Narnia was like, what? He was like a police officer or like a taxi driver, one of the two, and like his wife. And Aslan was like, "You are now king and queen of Narnia." And they're like, "Okay."
Hey, we get to like just drop whatever we want, and it springs to life right now in the first like 4 days.
I gotta reread those.
Yeah, now that we mentioned them, I might have to. I don't even think I ever read 6 and 7, or the ones that are chronologically, because I think I really liked Horse and His Boy when I read it too, but it's like not connected to anything.
It just takes it's during the reign of the Pevensey children, which is also kind of cool.
If I remember, the silver chair was kind of like, it kind of messed with my head a little bit, because like just like the aspect of like why someone, I think it was like had to be by the chair or something, and it was also the cousins, so Eustace and his friend that like, and Eustace was like the worst in the books before that, and then this time like he's supposed to be the likable one and his friend's supposed to be the one you don't like, and that was weird. Like that one was definitely like mentally like, what's going on?
When it's like, we can make fun of him, but because he's our worthless cousin. It's like, but if someone else is making fun of him, we're like, hey, that's our boy.
Exactly. All right, so from going on from like Scholastic Book Fair and like this like origin stuff, of everything that you've read like throughout time, do you have a favorite series? And do you have a favorite like standalone book? Like that's either not part of a series, or if you like something very, very, very much. I can go first, because this is not I alluded to it earlier, and it isn't a series I've mentioned yet. But my absolute favorite book series as a kid was called The Last Apprentice. But it's only called that if you're in the United States. If you're in the UK, it's called either The Wardstone Chronicles or The Spook's Apprentice. So those are different titles it goes by. A movie came out going over the first book called Seventh Son, and the movie I never really saw, but because it didn't look that good. But the series follows a character called Tom Ward, who is a seventh son of a seventh son. So he has these kind of like strange powers, and he becomes an apprentice to the local spook. And a spook is someone that drives away the dark, is what they call it in the series. And that's like witches, ghosts, boggarts, all this other stuff. It's like a young adult horror series. Like some of the stuff is like terrifying. And I listened to it as like an audiobook as a kid. So you had like the guy that's really good at it, like reading like, and she walked down the lane close to the river. And it was like, oh, that's terrifying. And I go to sleep to that. Yeah, that as a kid, I would listen to audiobooks to go to bed. Other people had nightlights. I'm like, I just need a voice. But then that series lasts for 13 books, and I read all 13 books. One of my favorite series of all time, because it brings in some aspects of Celtic mythology, this weird like kind of like perversion of like Christianity that through the lens of like Celtic and Irish mythology. Because in the first 3 books, it's like, oh, the dark. And then the 4th book, it's like, nah, the witches summoned the devil because Tom was becoming too much of a problem. And then the rest of the series is, well, how do we kill the devil? And that's kind of how it goes. But throughout like those other adventures, you meet like the nature god Pan, if you're familiar with him, and there's a couple of others that like you get. So it's like it starts off kind of small. It's like, oh, witches and like this kind of cool stuff, and then at the end, it's like murdering the most powerful evil deity that I can imagine.
It's like the memes about why can't I think of it? Supernatural, where it's like season 1, it's like, let's defeat this bad guy, and then it's like the last season, it's like, let's kill God.
Exactly.
First
Actually,
season
like
is let's get
4,
revenge on the
then...
demon that killed our mom. And hey, Dad's on a hunting trip, hasn't been home in a while. Start the reign of terror.
But isn't it Supernatural? It's like season 4 is like, yeah, let's kill God, and then they're like, well, how do we one up killing God?
No, I think.
Oh my gosh, we're
They were
open
big
such a
early
tangent.
on.
Okay.
There was one season where they were trying to find God because something was happening on Earth, and like the angels were being dicks, especially Zachariah. If you know Woody from Psych, he plays Zachariah, and he's a complete ass.
Oh no.
It's a complete contrast from him playing Woody, and it was so weird. But basically, like, you know, the angels are screwing stuff up on Earth, and you know, demons are raining terror. And they were trying to find God, and like Dean's necklace, amulet that he had in the first few seasons that Sam had given to him as a kid was supposed to like show them the way to God. And they ended up finding Joshua, who's in charge of the Garden of Eden, essentially. And Joshua was like, oh yeah, he's on Earth. And they were like, well, screw God, he doesn't care about us. Yeah, and then there's hints later about who God is, and that he makes a not comic series, but like the graphic novel series about the boys, and people think that it's completely fake, and like the boys end up at the convention for it's great. Supernatural's fantastic. Just like
Well, anyway, with no, you're good. With
Were we talking about books or something?
Yeah, we're talking about books. So Supernatural. But then after that 13-book series, he wrote another sequel trilogy. So there's 16 books, and the sequel trilogy introduces the concept of like what happens if it's a 7th daughter of a 7th daughter, and like that's like different. Not to get in like feminist soapbox, but like I thought I mean, I'm a guy, so I can't really like speak for women. But I thought the author did a pretty decent job of like giving us a strong female character. Because like 7th daughter of a 7th daughter like doesn't have the exact same powers as a 7th son of a 7th son, but like still impressive. The 7th, she has more like emotion related stuff. Like she can sense other people's like fear, which is very important, and things like that. She has other stuff. So like there's pros and cons. Not a perfectly created character, but like overall still very interesting and compelling. But then I found out yesterday while doing research, there's more. He wrote another one. He's starting another series that's like very loosely related, but it still brings in like the characters from the original 13 and then the next 3. And I was like, I need to get back into this series. And I'm so glad we were going to do this episode, because otherwise I would not have figured that out.
Fair
Um,
enough.
There it is.
I was originally excited to hear that there was like the seventh daughter, but then hearing that like he basically did the cop out of women are emotional, therefore she can sense
so
emotion
it's not
makes me
quite that.
skeptical. Okay.
That's why I'm like, so on one hand, it's like he gives her kind of like some of the stereotypical stuff. Like if you look at it, like women are emotional, so they're more emotionally attuned. Um, but on the other hand, it's like not giving her those same powers. It's like she's still a strong character, but not this typically masculine strong thing that there's like an issue with, or like to make a woman strong, you make her more masculine. Like she's not
That's fair.
masculinized, but is still strong. However, you still have that caveat of her powers are kind of, they're not powers though. She just like is super sensitive to people. Like it's not, it is emotions, but also like it's kind of like I need to reread it, but like it's cooler and I'd rather have the seventh daughter powers. Because
Okay.
it works for everyone. The seventh son of the seventh son powers only work for creatures of the dark. So it's like hers are a little more universal, and that's why it's described more like emotion, because things from the dark don't have emotions.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, and then my favorite book of all time, I've mentioned it before on the podcast, so I'll be really quick, is this. It's called And the Mountains Echoed by Khaled Hosseini. Um, and I read this book within the last year and immediately became my favorite. It's kind of like an anthology series in the sense that like each chapter is told from the perspective of a different character, but you're introduced to the character of the next chapter in previous chapters. And each chapter is like kind of a commentary on like the idea of love, and how there are different kinds of love, and like there's like sacrificial love, romantic love, friendship, things like that. And like it's very touching, and every chapter makes me cry. And I'm currently reading it with my girlfriend because I want to make her cry. So it's my favorite book, and I honestly I can't recommend this book more. If you're a English high school teacher, please assign this book if you can. If you're just a human being and you need to feel both bad and feel good at the same time, I highly recommend this book.
Stop adding stuff to like my book wish list. Okay. I have like 93 pages on one single Google Doc because I get emails from this company called BookBub, and what BookBub does is it goes through like Amazon and like wherever else you can get ebooks for your Kindle or your, if you're Barnes and Noble, your Nook or whatever it is, and it'll give you deals. So like you can get books for free or like 99 cents, or you can get like 6 books for 99 cents. Like it's great. But I also am sitting here going on half of them like, okay, screenshot this and save it because I want to find like a hard copy so I can give it to my students later. Yeah, it's 93 pages now. And that's not even like the other books that I have lists for.
I know what you mean. I have shelves back home, like, but like I'll get that. I'll ask for stuff for Christmas because like I see this, or like ask for my birthday, and then I get it, and I'm like, well, there's 16 things in front of you. So, so what about you two? Favorite series, favorite individual books?
All right. Well, there's there's a lot of series I love, and I thought about it. Like one of them, of course, being Percy Jackson series. I would even say Percy Jackson series, all of the entire Greek series. So Percy Jackson, the Heroes of Olympus, and then I haven't read all of them, but I've started the Trials of Apollo series, which is right after. All at the same time. I love that. But since we already talked about that, I do love the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I have a book, two full books that are the Hitchhiker's trilogy, but there's 5 books in them, which I don't know if that's just Douglas Adams being funny and putting 5 books in trilogy, but you might have seen the movie with Martin Freeman. Oh, look at this. There they are. Dun, dun, dun.
So Isaac, did you use the Force?
Yes, I did use the Force. Also, for our listeners out there, I just pulled them up magically.
Oh yes, for those of you listening on
girlfriend.
Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Isaac just summoned books out of thin air, so you might want to go watch on YouTube.
Anyways, they're fantastic. It's Douglas Adams. Oh, this one actually on the front says 5 complete novels and 1 story, which is a pretty cool title. Anyways, they're fantastic, and Douglas Adams is such a weird author, but he's brilliant. Like it takes place in, it's like sci-fi kind of, but also it's not, and it's all like humor, but it's 100% British. I don't know. Douglas Adams was a writer on Doctor Who, if that means anything, which it should, because it just shows you're expecting it to be weird aliens, a depressed robot named Marvin, stuff like that. So that's the series, I guess I'll recommend. It's one of my favorites. Then standalone book is really hard because there's a lot of books that I'm looking at on my bookshelf that are just single books that don't keep going, but I don't know. So I'm going to go with The Princess Bride. It is like William Goldman, who wrote the book, also wrote the screenplay for the movie, which is why it's so good. Like, it's good when the same author writes both. But
and the thing that you're missing from the movie is like the weird meta commentary in that book where he's like, William Goldman writes, he's like, I am William Goldman and this is my life. And that's like not how his real life is, but he just like turns it like there's just this weird meta universe of talking about himself. Yes. And it's so funny.
And that's what I was my favorite thing about it, that I'll like talk to people on length and they'll just be like, okay, like are you done? But it's that even on the front of the book, it says The Princess Bride by S. Morgenstern, abridged by William Goldman. But S. Morgenstern's not a real person.
No, it's William Goldman.
Is a narrative. Is William Goldman being like, yeah, when I was little, my dad read S. Morgenstern's book to me. And like, it jumps back between him as a kid, him talking about himself, him talking about, I think he even talks to Stephen King at one point. It's like in the book, it's like, yeah, I want to talk to Stephen King. But then it also goes to like the story and it's being abridged by him. So it'll be like a chapter will start. You just got done with like, Princess, I was gonna say bubblegum, but it's Buttercup. And the chapter will start and it'll be like, William Goldman will be like, insert. And he'll be like, yeah, so this chapter in the original book just talks about the flora and fauna of Florence. And it's really boring stuff. So I'm actually going to skip this chapter and get back to like the action. And like, I'm like, this dude's cheating at writing because it's not a real book and he's pretending. It's so brilliant, but it's so beautifully written. I don't know. It's great. I highly recommend it.
We read it in my junior year English class, like, and we had to like write like analyses of the book, and I'm like, this is just a fun book anyway. Like, I have no problem writing stuff on this.
I'll be honest. So in 6th grade, we watched the movie. I don't remember why. I think it was just one of those like random, hey, we're having a movie day, and this is what we're watching. And I just remember getting so mad at the title because I didn't understand the title. Like, how can it be a princess bride, but she's the princess, and I was like, no. And even to this day, like, I'm still like, I have some issues with it, but I'll get over it. Oh gosh, okay. And so asking me what my favorite book series is, my go-to is Harry Potter, but that's also because like that is my life. My life is Harry Potter. But honestly, like, if I was gonna recommend things, if people wanted to read like young adult novels that were mystery related, I would suggest Confessions of a Murder Suspect by James Patterson. That one is so good. There's so many twists and turns, and it follows the kids of a wealthy couple who get murdered, and there's like no trace of how like they get murdered, and all of the kids are suspects because all of the kids are like strange in their own ways, like they're like genius level and everything. And so it's the daughter, she's going through to try and like figure out who killed her parents. And I won't spoil anything, but it's really good. And like it continues on, and like there's different things that go on that like her family, there was rivals with another family, and the daughter was like in love with the rival. Like there was like a Romeo and Juliet thing, but then you also find out that maybe there wasn't, because you can't trust what she is talking about, because her parents essentially experimented on all of their kids because they were pharmaceuticals and like making the drugs and stuff. So they like gave their kids special vitamins to make them like super smart or be able to do X, Y, and Z. So yeah, it's really shady, but it's also really good. For science fiction, I would probably recommend the Maximum Ride series by James Patterson, which follows kids that are mutants who have wings, and some of them have other abilities. And that one was so good. And I want to say like the final book just came out a few years ago, which I think is called Nevermore, because it went through like, I'll have to look this up real quick, but like there was like 2 different sections of the book, like series. So like how Percy Jackson goes from the Greek gods to the Roman gods, and it's still a continuation. It was kind of like that. If I can spell. But so like it went from like titles that were kind of long to just like the names of the kids. So you've got The Angel Experiment, School's Out Forever, Saving the World and Other Extreme Sports, The Final Warning, and then you've got Max, Fang, Angel, Nevermore, and then Maximum Ride Forever is the final one. And then he also came out with a new book, which is like a spin-off of the series called Hawk, and that's on my list to be read. It's currently at school. But I really like that series because it took place relatively modern era. Like, you know, they're talking about global warming and how the seas are rising, and like, you know, they're doing these experiments to try and like save humanity and all of that. But like it's also these kids becoming kind of sort of superheroes to try and help save the world and everything. And yeah, I have a lot of books that I could recommend to a lot of different people. Like I'm one of those people that you really can't ask what my favorite book series is, because I'll just go off on different tangents about stuff.
Well, then I won't ever ask you again.
I would appreciate that. If you need recommendations, I got you.
When I want recommendations, I'll ask, so Hope, what's your favorite book series? And I'll get like 6 things. I'm like, thanks.
Yeah, whatever you need.
Actually, any geek to narrow anything down to one is hard enough.
Oh my God,
it is hard. Also, I find it really weird that none of us have mentioned anything about like the dystopian genre of like Hunger Games, Divergent, like anything around that. Because as much as I like those books, they're not like
that was so
they're not the ones that.
No.
I know. As much as I like those, they're not the ones that like super stuck out.
I got mad at Suzanne Collins with the last book. I'll be completely honest. Like how she ended it. She actually like finished the 3rd book after she already had the movie contract. And so I got really mad with how she ended the whole love triangle between Katniss and Peeta and Gale. Like and then the fact that she just like ended Peeta with like, oh yeah, you know, he still has his moments of PTSD, but like we just sit still and wait for it to be over. But other than that, we're living a happy, normal life. And it's like, no, that's not quite like how that would work.
No, listen, with Hunger Games, this Catching Fire delivered Finnick into my life, and I loved Finnick.
And then Mockingjay took him away, and that was BS.
And like not even in a good way. Like it just happened so fast.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait.
Well, and then she also pulled like the Tonks and Remus thing. Where like, oh, by the way, he has a kid, and you're like, what?
Oh.
What?
Yeah, but it's okay if he dies. Oh, spoiler.
Yeah.
Because he's got a kid, so it.
Oh yeah, and Annie is still alive. Like, and she's not messed up enough already. Like,
I just know he'll never meet his dad. That's a future superhero right there with no an orphan.
Well, I don't like. No, go ahead, Brendan.
Oh, I was just trying to move us into our next part of this.
I'll finish off real quick then. Um, so like also talking about like books from back then, Stephanie Meyer. I know she's come out with new books, but I don't like. And I was part of. I will admit I was part of the hype, and I was Team Jacob mainly because Taylor Lautner. Looking
Team
back on
Edward.
it,
Jacob's toxic as heck.
so is Edward.
So
I'm
is
sorry.
Edward, but like,
Let's be honest. I was Team Seth.
I'm part of Team Single. She's by herself, okay?
Yep. But like my best friend and I will rant about Stephanie Meyer because honestly, I don't think she's that great of a writer. Like the fact that she came out with what Midnight Sun, which is the Twilight, but in Edward's perspective. I was like, wow, that took so much creativity to come up with that. I'm like, okay, I want to say this straight out to any listeners. If you like Stephanie Meyer and the Twilight books, that's fine. We're all allowed our own opinions and everything. Like I don't want to offend anyone at all. Like I said, I did like the books at the time, but looking back, having grown on it, just seeing like the toxicity of everything. And also reading one of Stephanie Meyer's interview transcriptions where she was like, Bella wasn't a damsel in distress. She was just what a normal human being would be like when she's surrounded by superheroes. And I was like, okay, first off, if you didn't want her to be a damsel in distress, you should have written her differently so that we didn't get that feeling. And two, how are the vampires, the Cullens, superheroes? Because they don't really do anything to save anyone.
They're not heroes. They're just superpowered individuals.
Exactly.
I mean, there's lots of stories with those. But also, you're allowed to slander Stephanie Meyer because I slandered Martin Scorsese last week. So
I was gonna bring
Isaac,
that up.
who are you taking down next week?
All right.
Everyone get ready for Isaac's
Tune in
takedown.
next week and find out.
All right. And then I just wanted to ask real quick, what's everyone's...
I'm a standalone.
Oh.
Gosh, Brendan.
All right, this is Brendan signing off. Isaac and Hope are going to finish off the episode.
So I'm currently taking a class for my English major, teaching major, that is young adult literature. And we are currently reading The Poet X by Elizabeth I'm going to screw up her name.
Acevedo?
Yeah, Acevedo, I think. I learned today in class that she is actually like a slam poet, like spoken word poet, and I was like, that's awesome. But this book is about Xiomara, who is a Latina from Dominican Republic who is living in Harlem area in the Heights. And the book is written in prose, and it's set up in like 3 different sections. And we had to read the first section. And let me tell you, I didn't want to put this down. And you also go through it so fast because it's in prose. So you're just like scan down and you're done. And like there was one really powerful line in the book about her father. Basically, like it's a coming of age story about Xiomara because she is essentially forced into this role by her mother and by her church because she's Catholic and her mother is super duper religious and she has a twin as well. But like it's so good. And okay, so here's the line that like it just hits you and is in its own impact just on its own. So just because your father is present doesn't mean he isn't absent. Like just that one single line, and that's the end of like one chapter, like one little section, and it was just like boom, that's the line. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to finishing that one, and that's my standalone book. And now, Brendan, we may continue on.
Okay, what's on everyone's reading list to be reading in the future real quick? I know, Hope, you have a ridiculously long list, so like I'll try. I also have a long list, so I'll limit mine like to the most immediate ones. But for me, I got really into Kurt Vonnegut after high school. I read Slaughterhouse-Five in high school, and then I was like, I really liked his writing and the style behind that. So the next one for me is Cat's Cradle, and that's in the works. But then also I'm applying for grad school soon, so The Conscious Mind by David Chalmers, nonfiction, kind of obviously, but it's basically just like an amalgamation of consciousness research pre-2000s. So that's on my plate. And then I actually almost finished reading an evolutionary psychology book. Sorry, most of my stuff right now is school related. Called Why Beautiful People Have More Daughters, which evolutionary psychology is a very uncomfortable topic, especially if you don't understand how statistics work. Because if you just assume that everything that is stated by evolutionary psychology, like just because it is that's how it should be, then that's really problematic. Just like assuming like, men are strong, like men are physically stronger, that's like a thing, and that's just like a stat. But then like the people that take that one step further and say, therefore men should protect everyone physically, I'm like, no, that's like the problem. And if you don't make that distinction, evolutionary psychology is really problematic. But it's a really fun book to read, because then I get to answer questions like, why do beautiful people have more daughters? So, and that's actually a statistic. People that are ranked more attractive, tend to have more female children, or like born with XX chromosome children. So that's interesting. But that's the stuff on my radar.
Isaac, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. All right. So I guess on my reading list, currently, I'm in the process of reading Harry Potter to my girlfriend. And we're on the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Wait, like you read the book to her?
Yes.
I'm not the only one that does that?
No.
I'm reading this to my girlfriend, and it makes me so happy.
Because you mentioned that, and I was like, is he reading out loud there?
I am reading out loud.
Well, and this started because she went to drum corps for the summer.
What drum corps?
She was with the Colts.
Oh, nice.
And we would talk on the phone, and I would read Harry Potter over the phone to her. And now we're on the third one. So there's that. But I actually have my own like list of books. We're both doing like a year in books, where it's like hopefully one book a month. And I'm really bad because I'm on my first book and it's the end of February. But yeah, I have a few on here. Like I have a few Ocean at the End of the Lane and Neverwhere, which are both two Neil Gaiman books. I really like Neil Gaiman.
I also like Neil Gaiman.
I read the Graveyard Book, right?
I just read it, actually. It was like the last book I read. And it's so good. Same thing with Good Omens. I have both of those. And I don't have American Gods, but I do want to read that sometime.
How dare you?
I know.
So disappointing.
And so, yeah, I just have like a list of like books on my bookshelf that I haven't read that I want to. I have like The Mysterious Benedict Society, which I didn't even realize was a movie, I think, coming to Disney Plus June 25th. TV show. That's even better.
I think no, you're right. It's movie. There's a season 2 of something else that has a similar title.
And because of that, I realized that the book I have isn't the first one in the series, so I can't even really read it. I was like, mine has like a subtitle. I was like, oh, I guess it's not the first. I need to read The Return of the King. It's like I started Lord of the Rings in like middle school, and I love Lord of the Rings. And I read like The Fellowship, and like in high school I read like most of the Two Towers, but I still have to finish that and read Return of the King to actually say I've read it. I know, fake fan, y'all.
You're good. Have you read The Hobbit?
That's the second thing. I've read most of it, and I have to finish that. I read The Silmarillion, which is an odd flex. I started with the history.
Having not read The Hobbit and Return of the King, that's interesting.
I know. I read a lot of the wiki. And so I have like I said, I just The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. That's one that my girlfriend recommended.
So good.
Is that what?
It's a play.
I was gonna say it got turned into a play, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I have like the rest of the Apollo series I need to finish. That's the Dark Prophecy and the rest of the book. So yeah. All them.
Yeah. My little Kindle here, just my little one. I am currently reading a book called Obsidian Sun. It's a Nate Temple. It's the first in the Nate Temple series. He tips the Minotaur, and it's kind of hilarious.
Like tipping a cow?
Yeah, but it's the Minotaur. And then because he scares the Minotaur like grants him like a wish or like, to answer a question because the Minotaur is apparently an all-knowing being.
It's from his cow half.
That's what like turned me on to this book was like Minotaur tipping. I was like, all right, let's see what it does. But besides that, like I said, I get a lot of recommendations from BookBub. And I have been finding some interesting sounding like spins on fairy tales and stuff. So one, and it's now going to open the book, is called The Wendy. And I started reading that one too. And I started to write a review on it on my book review website. That I haven't written anything on since I haven't really like finished a book in a while. But so we know Wendy, Michael, and John as siblings. Well, Wendy, Michael, and John are not siblings in The Wendy. And there is like a mysterious aspect of what Peter actually is, if he's like a dark angel or like a demon or something, like something with magic. Nana is still there. Nana is adorable.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, she's still there. Wendy is her favorite, of course. And the weird thing that I still have to like get my brain to wrap around is the fact that Michael and John are like, wow, Wendy's really pretty. I'm gonna try and like date her, and like they're fighting over her, and I'm like, this is weird. But it's like kind of military-esque fighting the like supernatural type thing, and like Peter is supposed to be like the supernatural. And that one for me, I was like, ooh, and it hooked me right away. But then I of course get distracted by things. And I brought this book up as a recommendation a while ago. I started reading it and I still have to finish it. I'm one of those people that like starts a book and then puts it down, starts another book, puts it down, yeah. I know some people can't do that, but
I can't. I have to. I don't want to finish the Why Beautiful People Have More Daughters. I really want to start my Conscious Mind book, but I can't in good conscience start Conscious Mind without finishing the other one.
But yeah, and like I get that, and I definitely like have moments where I do that because like last summer I finished 2 books within like a week. Because they're like I got like Isaac where he found out that it was the second book of the series. And I was like, oh, it's the second book, and I've already bought it, and so now I have to go back and buy the first one. Turned out that those 2 you could read separately and like not be too confused. Like they could be standalone, but they work really well together. But Alexandra Bracken wrote a like modern century, like currently happening right now in New York, story about the Greek gods and how like every 6 or 7 years they end up in different parts of the world, and they basically have to like try and maintain their powers so that people don't come along and kill them and gain their powers. And it's called Lore. The book is called Lore, and it's really interesting. And right now Lore is the character, and she has to deal with Athena, who was bleeding on her doorstep of her apartment building, and they're in New York. And the fact that Athena's like, tie your life to mine, and basically like, if I die, you die, and I'm just like, what's going on? It's so good so far. I've read like
don't let strangers do that to you.
Don't let Athena like trick you into giving you her life. Like, you don't know who to trust.
Athena can trick me any day.
Yeah, so those are just some on my reading list right now. And I do say some because the list is like ever broke.
I understand. I have plenty of other things I could add in, but I don't want a 3-hour long podcast. We're already at like an hour and a half.
Woo!
And we have one more thing. So because we're an hour and a half, I want to make it quicker than I originally planned. But our main thing was for this episode was I asked Hope and Isaac to find their favorite headcanon in like book literature. So not like from movies, not from TV shows, but like in the books. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what headcanon is, it's what the fans think actually happened, even though it's not confirmed in any of the materials released by the author. I have to mention a real quick one before we get started with the serious ones. I saw one while researching this, and he mentioned the Magic Tree House, and then Isaac, you said something about Doctor Who. I saw something that said the Magic Tree House itself is just an old form of the TARDIS. And I was like, oh, crap. That's like
the TARDIS for kids.
It's just the TARDIS. So I just thought that was funny. So, does anyone have a headcanon like to start with?
Well, I have one, and this one kind of goes. So I came up with one last night, like just by myself, laying in bed trying to go to sleep, and all of a sudden I went, "Oh, what if?" But then the other one that's like kind of headcanon is a mix between what we got from the movies as well as from the books. So this one relates to the Harry Potter universe, and I'll state mine first that I came up with last night, and then I'll state the one that I read after the Fantastic Beasts movies. So we know in the Harry Potter series there's the Percival brothers, who are the Deathly Hallows, and they have the stone, the wand, and the cloak. And we know that Harry ends up with all three by the seventh book. But I came up with the headcanon that the second trio, or like the modern trio, for the Deathly Hallows is Neville, Draco, and Harry. So we know that Harry has the cloak from book one. So he is the youngest brother. Draco ends up with the wand after he disarms Dumbledore. And Neville I put as having the stone because his parents are technically dead after Bellatrix tortured them so much. But they are still alive, but they're like the shell and they're not really themselves. So I kind of like made it that way. So they're the current brothers. But so the big headcanon that I saw, and I was just sitting there going, this makes a lot of sense, is, like I said, it combines movie and book knowledge. So Dumbledore's sister, Ariana, there was a big, like, accident that happened within the Dumbledore family, and it caused Ariana to become, like, socially disengaged, as well as never using her magic again. And from the Fantastic Beasts movies, we know that an oculus is caused by suppressed magic, and it essentially overwhelms and eventually kills its host. So the theory is that Ariana became an oculus, and the oculus consumed her. And that oculus then went on to find another host and found it in Credence, which is why the Phoenix, the baby Phoenix, and Grindelwald say that Credence is a Dumbledore at the end of the second Fantastic Beasts movies. Second one, I think. And so that one, I was like, that makes a lot of sense, because if Ariana is dead, and then the Oculus has to have a host of some sort, and it's repressed magic, and Credence had been suppressing magic since he was born, because he lived in that orphanage where the mother was like, magic is a sin, let's kill all the witches. That, like, I was like, this could work, because when Grindelwald was like, yeah, Credence, you're a Dumbledore, we're all like, wait, no. But then I saw that theory, and I was like, I accept your theory. So that's mine.
Nice. I'd like something to tack on to the Hallows thing real quick. So I've heard my favorite one is that there were like precursors to the Hallows, and you see each of them throughout the Harry Potter books before the Hallows are introduced. The wand its counterpart, like basically the idea is that the brothers like made something before they actually made the Hallows. Like that
Yeah.
death didn't give them to them; they made the Hallows, but like they had to make something first in order to like practice. For the wand, it's the mirror of Erised. It shows you what you want. The wand can get you what you want.
Yeah.
For the stone, it's the veil in the Department of Mysteries. It takes you to the dead, does not bring the dead to you.
Only reason why Sirius Black is dead.
I mean, he did get a vodka Kedavra.
And then they lost his body
But
through
yeah,
the
they
veil.
lost his body.
And then the invisibility cloak is the pensieve, because you are invisible in your memories, so you can walk around amongst people the way you could with an invisibility cloak, but only in things that you've already experienced. So I've heard that one. So sorry about that.
No, I think that's really cool. I thought you were going to say the Philosopher's Stone at one point, and I was like, no, because that was created by Nicholas Flamel. But now that you say that, like, that sounds really interesting. And I'm just going to put it in really quick. For my final project for the Marvel class I took in December, I made Thor, Iron Man, and Cap as the Paravel brothers. So Thor with his hammer is the wand, and he's the oldest brother. And then Cap has the stone, because then he goes back to Peggy and he originally lives past her and then goes back to her. And so he's the middle brother, and then Iron Man is the one with the invisibility cloak with the Iron Man suit. So
See, now I thought you were going to say that Cap is the one with the invisibility suit because that hides the guy from death, and then the shield stops you from death. And I thought you were going to say Iron Man with the stone because he brought himself pretty much back to life with the arc reactor. But
I didn't think about that. No, I did Tony Stark, as well as being the youngest brother with the cloak, also because he greeted death as an old friend. So when he finally was like, I am Iron Man, I was like, all right.
All right. Well, headcanon. I had to think about this because I unfortunately like to take things as they are with books. I'm like, I guess that's just the way. But we're gonna go into some deep lore in from the Tolkien universe because, of course,
I knew one of you would bring something about Tolkien.
I have my shirt that's Tolkien symbol. Anyways, so basically, I really have two things. One is really just that I don't really want to believe something that happened. The other one is something may or may not happen.
Oh, but that's my headcanon is I don't believe something happened.
Yes, exactly. So the headcanon for one thing is that there's the five wizards. There's Radagast, Saruman, Gandalf, and then the two blue wizards who have names that I just can't think of right now. I was gonna look them up, but I'm lazy. But basically, they went off to the east, and they pretty much assumed that they failed their mission. And it's pretty much written that only Gandalf successfully passed in his mission, which, I could get really deep into the lore here. Basically, their mission is the wizards were sent there to stop Saruman, because to stop Sauron, because Sauron was a growing presence. And previously, they had sent pretty much all the gods had gone onto the world to defeat Morgoth, but now with Sauron, they sent wizards and they gave them rules. Like, you can't rule men. You can't become a position of power. You can only advise men. And so Saruman failed because A, he went evil, but B, he told people to go. And he doesn't really talk about the blue wizards, but basically they say that they failed. But Tolkien, being a man of many languages, he gave them names. But then he also gave them other names, and one of the names for one of those names means like helper, or like savior or helper. And so then I have this headcanon that basically it's basically really a theory, more like that the two blue didn't really fail, but as much as they just halted all of like a big portion of the darkness in the east, and that if it wasn't for them, that there'd be a lot more overwhelming force. And I know that's not like the deepest theory ever, but
That's okay.
I don't like believing that they failed. Now, my thing where I just don't really like that I said that I choose not to believe it is that Tolkien's original idea for all of Middle Earth was to create a mythology for Britain. And so basically the idea behind that, which he didn't publish all of this stuff, that's why it's in appendixes and whatnot, is that everything you see in Middle Earth right now, like in the movies and the books, eventually becomes modern day our world, modern day Europe. And like, so the elves leave. They talk about with the dwarves, there are basically Durin was like the oldest dwarf. He was the first to awaken. And since then, there's been 6 Durins, which are like their kings named Durin, and it's believed that they've been reborn. And they talk about how like the next Durin is going to be Durin the last. He's going to be the last of these kings of the dwarves. These special figures that basically will help out, and then the dwarves will disappear. The elves will all sail away, and then like hobbits will disappear. And so basically like everybody, I don't want to say dies out, but basically like everything dies out except for humans, and then becomes modern day Europe. And I just hate that. I want the idea of becoming boring old modern world when it used to be this big magical world. And so I like to try and believe that that doesn't happen, if that makes sense.
It does. I have a similar feeling about the Last Apprentice series that I told you about, because it's like it's set in like in the British Isles technically, and I'm like, are you saying that like this was actually how it was? And like, but there's no like time period, no time stamps, so I can't like do that. But my headcanon is actually related to that Last Apprentice series. So throughout the 13 books, there's like this like romantic interest between Tom, the main character, and a girl, Alice. And the first 12 books, it's like it's kind of like a will they, won't they, but like you're pretty sure they will. But then in book 13, literally like chapter 13. 3 or in like literally like chapter 3 or 4, like she tries to perform this spell, which like lets this like warlock go free. He like immediately shows up, and she goes, I choose him, and goes with him. And like you don't know who this guy is, all this other stuff. And then like at the end of the book, Tom fights this guy, to try and get Alice back, thinking that he put her under a spell. He beats him, and then Alice is like, I was never under a spell, I chose him. And then Tom spares his life. I would have killed him, like no matter what. I would just be like, that's it. And then after that, in the sequel trilogy, Alice comes back after the guy actually dies, and she goes, yeah, I just had to play along that entire time.
What?
Yeah. So it was really upsetting. Also, Joseph Delaney, the author, really good at like writing cliffhangers or like temporary endings, really bad at writing permanent endings. And I think that's why he has to keep going, because I hated the ending of the 13th book, and I really didn't like the ending of the 3rd book of the trilogy. But my headcanon is the 13th book didn't happen.
Cut out the whole book.
I don't like it, and I think from that spell onward, something went really, really wrong, and everyone kind of got like it got twisted. And there is kind of evidence for it, that like when Alice mentions like, yeah, I wasn't under a spell, but I had to go through this stuff. I think there's this weird magical thing that happened that might be addressed in like this new series that caused reality to kind of get warped a little bit, because it's like old magic being used. So my theory is all the stuff I didn't like didn't happen in the 13th book, and all the stuff I didn't like that happened after that is because of that thing I didn't like in the 13th book not happening. So that's my headcanon, is I don't like how my favorite book series ended, so I choose not to believe it's real.
We've all been there before.
Yes.
Doing that with the Hunger Games, right? The final book in the Hunger Games does not exist.
Hunger
Finnick doesn't die.
I kind of liked the actual ending of like she kills Coin instead. Spoiler: she kills Coin instead of Snow. I liked that. But everything else about the ending was annoying.
I'll accept that.
Well, as always here on Raving Geeks, we like to end with some recommendations for you viewers, whether that be movies, video games, comics, or anything else geeky. We already given quite a few book recommendations today, but my hosts, do you have anything else you'd like to recommend?
Why not? All right. Well, we talked a lot about mythology, and I got thinking. I was like, what can I recommend with mythology? One is before Percy Jackson, the thing that really got me into Greek mythology and Norse and Egyptian was the game Age of Mythology, which is made by the people that made Age of Empires, and it plays very similarly, where you start in like an age and you pretty much like build little builders that build buildings that build troops and then upgrades. That's on Steam, and I have it. I had it on disc, and then it got too scratched, and I got really upset. And then they put it on Steam, and I was like, yes, I have that. And it's just, I don't know, like you can like it's its whole story, but like you can right click on like a troop and like learn like the mythology behind it. It's really cool. Like that's where I first learned that Krakens are a Norse monster and not a Greek monster. Secondly, there's a TV show. I don't know if it's on Netflix anymore. It was a long time ago, but it's called The Almighty Johnsons, and it takes place
I remember that.
in New Zealand, and I love New Zealand. Many reasons. But basically, it's about Norse gods and that they're like souls inhabit people, and it's like if your like parents were gods, then the kid's gonna be like a god. And you find out what your god is on your 21st birthday. And so it's about this family with its 4 siblings, and the youngest turns 21 in the first episode, and he wakes up and like they do this little ceremony and like lightning flashes, and you find out that pretty much he's inhabited by Odin, like the All-Father. And so like his older siblings technically have to do what he says, even though he's the youngest. But it's basically this like big crazy family, and it's all like Norse, and like crazy things happen. It's a little it's like a comedy almost. The guy that plays Feely in The Hobbit, which is of the 2 younger brothers, like the blonder one, he's in this show, and he's one of the brothers. And it's funny because they're filming The Hobbit happened during the 3rd season of this, so they're like, oh yeah, he just went to Norway, and like so it's like that's why he has a beard, but he still is like in the show on Skype calls, and I think that's super cool that like an actor did that. He filmed The Hobbit and a TV show. I think it's rated M because there is some nudity, but it's New Zealand, everything, you know. So yeah, mythology. Jump on that bandwagon.
Or like Nude Zealand, am I right?
Hey!
That's not how it actually is. I'm pretty sure they wear clothes there. But
we got it. We got it.
That's a wrap, everyone. Sorry, Hope and I don't give our recommendations. That we got to end on a high note. Just joking. Hope, go ahead.
So I have, of course, quite a few. So I started watching the show All American, which is currently a show on the CW, and the first 2 seasons are on Netflix. And I started watching that, and I really like the fact that it's a Black protagonist, and a lot of the characters are Black. And like you have to deal with like Beverly Hills, but also like the slums of Beverly Hills that like have to deal with like gangs and everything too, and like what happens when someone's trying to live in both worlds and stuff, and like how the kids in Beverly Hills don't necessarily know what's going on because they're rich, and so they don't have to know. And so yeah, the first 2 seasons are on Netflix. On Disney Plus, they just added these 3 movies, which are all amazing. So first 2 are Cheaper by the Dozen, number 1, and Cheaper by the Dozen, number 2. And they are all, both of them are absolutely amazing. They're hilarious. They're family movies. They're old, but like also they're still classics. They're beautiful. And Book of Life is an animated movie, and I'm trying to remember, it's based on like the idea of like Dia de los Muertos, I believe. So Mexican culture and like their beliefs and everything. I saw it when my school did on like voting day. They did like a movie all night thing at like the theater, Imagine Theater in Novi, and that was one that I got to see. And one of my friends and I have a running joke because there's a line and it says, "It smells like hope." And so every time he would see me, he's like, "You smell that? It smells like hope." And I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And the final recommendation, because we were doing books, is a TikTok account. So it's Romeo Roams, and it's so Romeo like Romeo and Juliet, and then Roams like roaming. So RomeoRoams. He is British, and he has a collection of collector's edition books that are like leather bound and like the Barnes and Noble editions. So like he's got Jules Verne, the complete tales and poems of Edgar Allan Poe, the complete Sherlock Holmes, Grimm's fairy tales, the Divine Comedy, and like he will pull them out and like show them off because people are like, "Can you show off this book?" And they're so pretty. But also he's been doing like readings from certain books, like from the Grimm fairy tales or from Sherlock Holmes, and his voice, like all of us, his followers, are trying to get him to get a YouTube account because like he's like that ASMR voice of like just like so calm and deep and just like you could fall asleep listening to it because it's so calming.
Something about being British.
Something.
As soon as you say that voice, though, I think of like corpse husband voice. Like, yeah, you don't really want to talk like that this entire time. Like the deep one. That's the voice that I find calming. But apparently, I'm the only one. Everyone else finds it exhilarating. I'm like, no, it makes me calm. However, for my media recommendations this week, I highly recommend Star Wars: The Secrets of the Jedi. This is a book, but it's just different aspects of the Star Wars universe from Luke Skywalker's perspective. So, like, it's his perspective on like the Old Republic, his perspective on Mace Windu, Qui-Gon Jinn, and also like original trilogy characters and stuff like that. But it's like, oh, this is what Luke thought. So I thought that was really, really interesting. I also recommend the show The Society on Netflix. I've been waiting for season 2 to come out. Don't think it's ever coming now. But the first season was really, really good. If you kind of like a mystery suspense thriller that coupled with like a teenage drama, it's really, really good. But then also, so this is a recommendation specifically for Hope, but any album by the band The Killers, go for. So they make really good music, and if you haven't heard any of their music, you've probably heard Mr. Brightside. But if you can't think of any other songs, go listen to Mr. Brightside. So
Listen,
that
I'm trying
is
with
all
the TikTok trends here. I'm trying with those TikTok trends that are like, if you were born before this year, then you should know all of these songs.
I always know all the songs.
I usually know all but like one.
I have yet to like find one where I'm like, I don't know that song. Well, that is all we have for you today. Thank you all for joining us on Raving Geeks. Make sure you leave a comment wherever you're listening from. We'd love to hear from you, whether it was about what we talked about today or what you want us to talk about in the future. Also, feel free to reach out on Facebook, Twitter, and our TikTok pages at Raving Geeks. And as always, I have been Brendan Valentine, along with my co-hosts,
Hope Gooderl,
Isaac Hunter.
So stay geeky and have a great weeky, everyone. So long.
Woo!